Welcome back to the Roundtable on the IH Sports Network, live from El Rey. I'm Ben Garrett, Tim Smith, Rick Keaton, and we have reached the part of the show that typically comes last, and that is where we take a look ahead to this week's games. This week we're bumping it up because we've got a pre-recorded ending to this show, which of course is Sparky Woods and Tim Smith's interview with him. So as we take a look ahead to next week's games, this is only our second week doing it in this format, and this is becoming – it was a fan favorite last week. Let's just put it that way. So we're joined by Scott High cheerleader Chloe Tucker, and we're joined by Oneida cheerleader Nevaeh Carl. Now, you guys go to two different schools, but obviously you're very familiar with one another. You guys cheered together in middle school. Both of you were at Birchfield. Okay, so we did this last week, and I said I'm going to ask the cheerleaders each week because I got in trouble. You know Olivia Rector, okay? I said last week that she growled at me, and maybe she didn't really growl at me, but she got a little testy when I said that cheerleading wasn't a sport. I didn't really say that cheerleading wasn't a sport, but she thought that's where I was going. So what I want you to do first, and then I want to ask you, Nevaeh, I want you to tell everybody why cheerleading is a sport.
What we do at Scott High and Oneida, I wouldn't consider the things we do competitive, which makes it a sport, but there are competitive teams out there, which makes cheer a sport.
Why is it a sport?
I'd have to agree with Chloe, but I do feel like we're like mentally, physically, we're like dedicated, and like we're like the crowd depends on us. The football players depend on us to keep the crowd up. And, I wouldn't necessarily say like what we do is competitive, but we practice. Like Leah said last week, we practice, we give it our all, and yeah.
That's such an unfair question. I'm just going to throw in here. Why wouldn't we just say, Ben, why is it not a sport? You prove it's not, because, are we going to do this every week? Or are we going to make the
Great
cheerleaders
question.
prove? Thank you, Rick.
Great question, Tim. Yeah, Ben,
Okay,
you're on the
so-
spot.
Well, I never said it wasn't a sport, okay? Anyway, back to my line of questions. This is my
Good.
turn.
Maybe we're past that question.
Wait your turn. You guys are both seniors, okay? So I was just giving them a chance
I
to build up
understand.
cheerleading. You guys
Yes.
are both seniors. This is your final year cheering, and we're coming up to the end of football season. So you got basketball season after that. What are you still hoping to experience as you go through this final year of being on the cheer squad?
I just really, I don't know, football is probably my favorite. Like, I love basketball, but it's just something about football, just cheering, and I just want to just continue, and I want to, leave. I don't really know what I'm trying to say. I'm really going to miss the people that I cheer with, and I just really want to have fun and just make it, where I look back and I was like, I really had the greatest time cheering. So I just really want to give it my all.
And Chloe, do you have a favorite, football versus basketball?
Not a favorite, no.
So you're going to roll out of football into basketball, which starts almost immediately after football ends, and you're not going to skip a beat. It's just a continuation of the same thing?
Yeah, not the same thing, different environment, but we do the same thing.
Okay.
I have one, if
Okay.
I could.
Okay.
So the football thing, temperature controlled year-round in basketball. That's no problem. Football, as far as my observation, you're sweating to death if you're like me at the first couple of football, and then by the last two, you're freezing. How do you deal with that? Chloe, you go first. What is there a way to deal with that, or do you just suffer through it?
At the beginning of the game, once it starts getting cool, you stay in your uniform, but we make changes with our uniforms. We get warm-ups, or we get a sweatshirt to wear.
Okay.
That we do the same, and then we wear our mids, our turtlenecks, if it gets cold, and then we don't it in the beginning because it's 90 degrees.
Well, that's what I need to start doing then.
Okay. You would look good dressed that way.
Yeah.
All right, guys, let's pick some football games. Do you guys keep up with high school football around East Tennessee, or do you just watch Scott High and you just watch Oneida and you kind of leave it at that?
I keep up with Scott High and ours, obviously,
Yeah.
but that's about it.
Okay, well then this is going to be great. Okay, so and I told Leah
Indeed
Terry
it will
last
be.
week that it was a little bit unfair because all the teams that Oneida's familiar with was off, and this week just the same for you. It's kind of unfair because Scott High's playing obviously, but Anderson County's off, Southdale's off, Carter's off. But it sounds like you're not familiar with them anyway, so does it really matter? All right, we're going to start with Wartburg playing at Rockwood. This is a game that is important for the Oneida Indians as Wartburg comes into this game at 2-5. Rockwood is at 4-3. That game is going to be played at Rockwood. The Tigers, of course, coming off that big win over Oneida 2 weeks ago. And I'll start with you, Nevaeh. Wartburg at Rockwood, who have you got in that game?
I think probably Rockwood.
Okay. Because if Wartburg were to win, Tim Smith, then you start getting a little nervous if you're an Oneida fan. Am I right about that? Because do you think in a tiebreaker situation that it could work out where Wartburg could slip in?
I mean, it's really hard for me to think in that situation.
Here, I'll answer the question
Go ahead.
for you. Probably not.
I'm just trying to keep the drama alive, guys. Chloe, who do you have, Wartburg or Rockwood?
Rockwood.
Okay. Now, this is the only region game in Scott High's region this week that between, I'm sorry, it's not. There are a couple others, but it's one of the few games, and that would be Gibbs playing at York Institute. This is another team from Oneida's region as well. Gibbs is 4-3. York Institute is 5-2. I'll start with you, Chloe. Who have you got, Gibbs or York?
Gibbs.
Okay.
Gibbs.
So we're all in agreement that Gibbs is going to defeat York. Pretty good football team in York, but Gibbs is a pretty good football team as well. Okay, so now it gets real. Got Scott High going to Fulton. Fulton is not the Fulton team that we're all used to from years past, but they're starting to come back, and they're a pretty good football team. So Scott and Fulton, you're on the spot now.
I told Clayton I wouldn't hurt his feelings, but we are down players who are beneficial on the team, so probably Fulton.
And it's a road game, you know? So, yeah okay. So Scott or Fulton?
I hope Scott wins, but probably Fulton.
Okay. And we're not going to let anybody hold your answers against you, by the way. All right. Oneida, Monterey. Now,
Fulton is the Falcons, so you never can count on it.
says the Atlanta fan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Oneida, Monterey. Now, this is a huge game for Oneida. Oneida is 3-4. Monterey's 5-2. I'm going to guess that cheerleaders are just like the rest of us. Nobody wants to make a 4-hour road trip to start the playoffs. So you need Oneida to win this week. They're going to Monterey. Monterey is coming off of a 30-21 win over Lakeway Christian. Who's going to win this game Friday night?
We are.
Okay. Confident.
Oneida,
You're
yes.
confident.
I'll say Oneida.
Okay. So
I don't know how either one plays, so.
Oneida's going to beat Monterey on Friday night, and I'm going to throw one more out at you. This is not a high school game, but this is the game that everybody in East Tennessee is talking about this week, and that is number 3 Alabama, 6-0, coming to Knoxville against number 6 Tennessee, 5-0. Alabama or Tennessee, who wins this week?
Tennessee.
Tennessee.
Go Vols. All right, Rick and Tim, let's talk real briefly about this week's games. Oneida goes to Monterey. We'll start with that. What does Oneida have to do to win at Monterey?
They got to stop Monterey from getting to the edge, and I'm pretty sure they're going to have to pass to open up the run.
Okay. And Rick, Scott High going to Fulton. What does Scott High need to do on Friday night?
Contain the edge. I mentioned earlier, find some way to neutralize their quarterback, Jackson. He's the cat that last year I watched one highlight film of him. He cut back across the field about 5 times, picking up a touchdown from 75 or 80 yards. And defensive players, they just can't keep up when he's making those cuts. So contain and limit the quarterback and hope that he has to take an ACT test the next morning and maybe doesn't even play.
Okay. All right. Scott High playing at Fulton on Friday night. Oneida is at Monterey on Friday night. 2 road games this week. Scott kicks off at 7. Oneida kicks off at 8. And we'll have both broadcast on the IH Sports Network. Chloe Tucker and Nevaeh Carl, thank you guys for joining us and for representing your 2 cheerleading squads in your high schools. We'll take a break. When we come back, we're going to have Tim Smith sit down with Sparky Woods, former Oneida Indian.